Moving on to one of, for me, the sort of an informal headline session of the Gender Balance Summit this year. Baroness Helena Morrissey DBE is familiar to many of you watching, I know. She is the founder of the 30% Club, and you've heard lots about the 30% Club already today. She is also the chair of Diversity Project. We're going to hear a little bit more about them later on, but really driving sort of greater diversity across all sectors within finance in particular. She was announced as one of Fortune magazine's world's 50th greatest leaders, and in 2017 was awarded the Financial Times Person of the Year in their Boldness in Business Awards. And such is her, I guess, her power now and the brilliant work that she's done. She's been able to command an interview with the Right Honourable Elizabeth Truss, Member of Parliament for the UK government. I'll hand over to her shortly, but Liz Truss is Minister for Women and Equalities and also the Secretary of State for International Trade. So, Helena, it's over to you.
Hello, I'm delighted to be joined today by Liz Truss MP, who is Secretary of State for International Trade and what we're talking about today, Minister for Women and Equalities. Hello Liz, and thank you so much for joining me. It's wonderful to have you as part of the Gender Balance Summit, so thank you. I guess I've got to start with the fact that this year's International Women's Day comes at a time when many of us are quite worried about the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown on women's lives. We seem to have borne the brunt of the pandemic in terms of childcare and domestic duties, and of course more women are employed than men in some of the most vulnerable sectors in the economy, like hospitality and leisure and beauty. How do you feel about that? Are you worried at all we might see the clock turn back?
I think it's been a very, very tough time. People are struggling. People at work have got Zoom fatigue. I've got 2 children who are currently learning online. It is really, really tough for parents. It's tough for families. It's been tough for people working in business, but I'm at heart an optimist, and I do believe we can learn some of the lessons of what's happened during the pandemic to build back better post the pandemic, and that's very much what I'm focused on in my job.
So of course one of the great silver linings to this terrible year has been that we've been all forced, or many of us forced, to work from home, and it's proved what we couldn't prove in theory, that actually we can be very productive and working from home can work. It's one of the great hopes that I have that as we build back better, we will see more men and women take a more equal lives and more share in domestic duties and career opportunities. Tell us a bit about what the government's just announced in terms of supporting flexible working and encouraging companies to offer that.
So we want to normalise flexible working. What we've seen during the pandemic is, of course, it can help people be more productive. It can help balance all the other responsibilities people have. But it also helps people who don't live in the major cities. Yeah. It helps us level up across the country, as well as levelling the balance between men and women. We know that more women want to work flexibly, but we know that a lot of the jobs currently advertised, even though they are flexible, aren't advertised as such. And in fact, it's seen as something special to ask for. So we want to move away from that to a case which we've had now, where flexible working is mainstream. It's the automatic assumption when you apply for the job that you'll be able to work flexibly. And I think that will open up more opportunities for women in particular. I think it will open up more opportunities across the country, but it will also bring a wider talent pool to bear on our businesses and companies, because we know it helps people be more productive as well. So exactly, yeah. This is one of the opportunities I see now as we recover from COVID, to do things differently, to sort of break the sort of closed shop of you had to buy an expensive flat in central London to have a high-flying career. I want people to be able to have those high-flying careers, whatever circumstances they're in and whatever part of the country they live in.
Well, I could agree more. We obviously certainly disproved it used to be called shirking from home. That's how people have called the working from home, and now we've shown we're not shirking at all when we're working from home. In fact, quite the reverse. Sometimes it feels like we're living at work rather than working at home, I think. And on that, I know that in your Fight for Fairness speech that you gave last December, you talked as well about a sort of levelling up in a way that people often don't think of it, around promotion processes and how people will be more assessed going forward, we hope, on sort of output, on actually work done. I mean, I personally feel that a lot of promotions and opportunities in careers have often come about through playing office politics. I mean, the small p I'm talking about there. And presumably that's going to be one of the hopes as well, that we will see people measured on what they're actually producing.
Well, I completely agree. And what we know is where there's more transparency in workplaces around pay, so pay in jobs adverts, whether it's promotion opportunities, whether the jobs are advertised widely, whether there's an automatic process, we know that it opens it up to more people, and it's particularly beneficial for women because there's been a lot of research done by the likes of Iris Bonet, which shows that when you have those clear and transparent systems in workplaces, you get rid of a lot of the informal nature of some of these processes, and it helps be much more objective, and that, generally speaking, benefits women for whom there has always been a higher social cost of asking.
Exactly,
whether it's for a pay rise or whether it's for a promotion, it's often tougher. We know in other spheres when women are putting themselves forward to get venture capital for their businesses, even if they've got exactly the same proposition on the table as an equivalent man, it's harder for them to get that funding. A lot of these things are social and cultural, so the more it can be systematized, the more it can be open and transparent, the better it is. And I think that's the kind of change that we need to see in our workplaces, because for too long it has been about presenteeism. I mean, politics is the ultimate presentee business where you turn up to votes and so forth, but it's got to be about what value people have to offer. And I think the pandemic and more flexible working has encouraged employers to think in that way, and we need to make sure we build on that.
Exactly. I mean, Iris wrote the great book, Gender Equality by Design, where she obviously showed, again, automating things, making them, changing the system rather than just sort of hoping that everybody moves along culturally. I mean, I'm delighted to hear that, you've obviously support data, evidence, transparency and so forth. And I think a lot of people watching us will be very pleased that the government's announced, that gender pay gap reporting is back on the table this year, that obviously with the 6 months sort of hiatus for companies to get their act together on that. But are there any other measures that the government is thinking about in terms of transparency around, you mentioned again in this speech around wage bans perhaps, that might help level the playing field? Is there anything else that you're...
Well, we are looking at the whole area of flexibility, the whole area of pay. But my fundamental view is we need to look at this on a universal basis, because we don't want to end up with gender segregation in terms of the way we do things. I think the way that we help level up for women is also the same way we help level up for people from different backgrounds, people from different ethnic minorities. Having a more fair, transparent system where people know what to expect, where it's clear what salary is being offered when you apply, where it's clear how promotions are decided, where it's clear the funding criteria that your business will be assessed on, it levels the playing field. Definitely, and that's what I want to achieve. And I think in the past, there has been some moves made for good intentions, for example, extending maternity leave, but not significantly extending paternity leave, which happened under a previous government. They've actually ended up disadvantaging women because you're piling expectations on women to do the sort of childcare and baby care as well as the work. So I think it's about creating that real transparency and flexibility so we can focus much more on what are people's capability and talents rather than are you a woman, are you a man, are you from Darlington, etc.
I mean, what would you like businesses to do more of? Because this is all about, today, we're all about calls to action as well. We're not just sort of saying, the government has to fix everything. So what can businesses do? Because there's a lot of these things could be disclosed already. And as a shareholder, as an investor, it's very aggravating that this data isn't freely available.
Well, you're right. And the book that you recommended is, I think, a very good book. But I think it's about clarity. Is when job adverts go out, are you being clear that this job can be done flexibly? Are you being clear about the pay that you're going to award? Within companies, are you clear about promotion prospects? Do you always insist employees ask for those promotions, or is an automatic route where talented people can be promoted through the organisation. And these are the types of techniques that can really help level the playing field and make things a lot fairer, rather than relying on people to ask. Because I think that's a lot of, in a lot of cases, that tends to disadvantage women, because, as I've said, for cultural and social reasons, there is a higher cost of asking.
And I've always been perplexed, when I've said, well, these women are not necessarily asking for pay rises because, why should they? Why should they put up their hand? And people have said, oh, they need assertiveness training about asking for a pay rise. I said, no, companies should be recognising who is contributing and paying based on merit and contribution, not because someone's shouting loudly.
Absolutely. And this goes to the point of unconscious bias training, which the government has now stopped because it doesn't work. And there are two approaches. Either you say, we're going to try and change the people. So we're going to try and stop people having biases, or we're going to make these group of people be more assertive. Or you say, we're going to change the system to make it more fair. And what always works, culture is incredibly hard to change. Yeah. But actually changing the system to fit the way people actually are and actually behave can deliver real change and opportunity. So, I often point to some of the great drivers of equality have been things like independent taxation for women, or setting up academies to actually change the educational culture in a given area. Those are the types of changes that make a difference. Trying to change people and the way they think is a bit of a monk's game.
Yeah, pushing a boulder uphill. Just can we go back to the point you made about women entrepreneurs, and obviously female-founded businesses have struggled to get a very big share of the overall pot of funding available, and I think it went down last year, which was quite staggering from a very small percentage. Obviously the Rose Review set out a number of measures, and you yourself said that, if we had equal funding, women could add £250 billion to the British economy, which would be very useful at the current time. Are you satisfied enough's being done on that? Would you like to see any particular, for example, in the investment world, there's a new fund set up by Business Growth Fund in conjunction with Coutts, and this is targeted not at just female entrepreneurs, but with a particular effort to try to find those businesses that are run by women that will deliver a good return. Is there anything that you feel is missing at the moment, or that we have got enough? Do you feel we've got enough momentum there?
I think more transparency about the types of businesses that are getting funding, I think would be very helpful. More transparency about the process that's required to secure funding, and also more in the same way as you've been very successful through the 30% Club of getting more women at senior levels in businesses, having more women at senior levels in venture capital operations and so forth. Those are the things that will drive the change. But I'm a great believer in transparency as a driver of change, and just people being able to understand how to secure the funding. Exactly. And also when, I'm not an expert in corporate finance, but when that funding process takes place, the more objective and measurable it can be, the better, because it does tend to, revert back to the closed shop or the old boys network when those measures aren't in there.
Well, we're doing our best in the Diversity Project, which is sponsoring today's event, because we only have 10% representation of women as fund managers in the broader industry, not particularly in private equity, but it's not any better in private equity. And it's a classic example, really, where it has felt like a bit of a closed shop, as you've referenced. And any support the government can give, any help we can give in terms of creating this virtuous circle here is welcome. I want to ask you one question, maybe a bit sort of a funny one, but you referred to in your speech in December, which I thought was very impactful. And obviously you were setting out a new agenda around the equality agenda. And you referenced, trying to call time on pink bus feminism. So what did you mean by that, Liz?
This is the famous pink bus that Harriet Harman took a group of female Labour MPs on. And what I'm fundamentally saying is equality should be for everyone. It's not a woman problem alone that women are underrepresented in, STEM and technology industries or corporate finance. It's a problem for all of us, because where you have these closed shops, you're not getting the best talent, you're not getting the best productivity, and ultimately what that means is that the economy isn't growing as fast, there aren't as many jobs being generated, and that makes all of us worse off.
Yeah.
And it limits people's life chances and opportunities. So I think men should care as much as women that this is a problem. And in the same way, I think that everybody in society should care if there's racial discrimination. I don't think it's just the role of ethnic minorities to comment on that, or if there is discrimination against LGBT people, again, it's a problem for all of us. So that's the point I'm making. The idea that it's just a woman's job to protest against sexism is completely wrong.
Well, when I'm ever asked about, why was the 30% Club successful when other initiatives, including ones I'd run myself before, were much less so, I said it actually was to do with the men getting involved. And they weren't just sort of, supporting us, by patting us on the shoulder and saying, oh yes, off you go, girls. They actually were championing the cause. They were proper allies, tying their success to the success of that. So, and I think again, you're right that black people need white allies, LGBT people need straight allies. It's everybody's job to make this, a success, to actually change the nature of our society and our businesses and organisations. Now, I know you've just launched and announced a very exciting venture, the Gender Equality Advisory Council for the G7. Can you tell us a bit more about that, Liz?
So this is our initiative at a global level. We are president of the G7 this year. We will have the Gender Equality Advisory Council, which will champion women as part of our overall agenda to build back better. So it's called Women Build Back Better. It's going to feature leading scientists, leading technology experts, leading figures from around the G7 and beyond. And it's going to focus on enterprise, education, and ending violence against women. And it's all about, we've been talking earlier about how we're levelling up opportunities for women in the UK, but we want to do that on a global scale because we know that girls and women have suffered disproportionately. We know there have been issues around violence against women, around girls losing out on educational opportunities, on women-led enterprises. So we want to lead the change at a global level to help women build back better. And one of my particular passions is getting more girls and women into STEM. We know this is such a growing part of the global economy. We know that technology is the future, and we want women to have a part of that. We want to unleash the talent. So I'm going to be announcing some very exciting female figures who are going to lead that charge.
Fabulous. Well, I think I can say very hand on heart that as in my role as the lead NED at the FCDO, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, I know that girls' education takes up a lot of the budget in terms of overseas development. So the government's putting its money where its mouth is. You also mentioned in December about a whole of government approach to equality. And I guess I love that concept because I think, collaborative approach, making sure the left and the right hand are sort of doing the same thing. Can you give us any specific examples of how that is working?
So I see it as a sort of hub and spoke model, that we have the equality hub working across government departments, but ultimately it's for the education secretary to make sure that our school education is fair, that it's treating girls and boys equally, that there are equal opportunities regardless from where you come from in the country, that no ethnic minority group is losing out. And ultimately it's the departments themselves that conduct equality impact assessments and think about how they can do things better. And it's back to the point I was making earlier, that equality is for everyone. It shouldn't be some siloed responsibility of a single minister. It's core to government delivery to make sure that we're advancing equal opportunities, we're advancing fairness, and we're levelling up the country. So that is the overall vision.
It's a big plan. And finally, can I ask you a sort of more personal question really about what International Women's Day means to you? Is it a day of celebration? Is it just another day? Is it, does it have any resonance for you personally, Liz?
Well, it is a day of celebration. And I also think this year in particular, it's a day of opportunity. We are starting to see, the opening up of the economy again in Britain, the successful vaccine programme across the world, and we need to look to the future. So I want us to use this International Women's Day to mark the start of that recovery, and in particular of women building back better. And I think that's what we can do.
Fabulous. Well, it's also, of course, the day that schools return. So many women will be celebrating that as well. So it's just a coincidence, I'm sure. But thank you so much, Liz. And thank you for sharing so many thoughts with us.
Thank you.